Now, with that, I think that's everything from me, with the exception of the commercial disclaimer, which you should all be able to see on your screen now. It was also sent to you all a few days ago, so hopefully you've all familiarised yourself with it. I won't trot through it all now, but do please bear in mind that this is an informal market engagement exercise designed to inform thinking, to share information. And you know, I think that the fourth bullet point there, this material does not necessarily reflect any specific DWP policy. It is one in particular to pay attention to. I think that's all the housekeeping from me. And with that, delighted to take Matthew off mute and bring him into the conversation. Matthew Bradley, Commercial Director for DWP. If you're able to unmute yourself.
I am. Thank you, Henry. So welcome all. And yeah, first things to say is you know, this has been an event long planned, long thought through. So, you know, delighted that this is something that we're able to deliver today. I guess when we originally planned to do this and had envisaged it, I expected to be standing on a stage in front of you all, you know, wearing a suit and tie rather than in my study at home wearing a nice comfy jumper. But different times. So thank you, Henry, to yourself and your colleagues in Tech UK. You know, DWP been working with you guys for some years now, and you know, you continue to provide a hugely important conduit and support between DWP and the wider IT market. So thank you for that, and thank you for facilitating that. And as you described, you know, this is the start of a conversation, not the end of one. And you know, we look forward to continuing to work with you. So thank you. But also probably just to say some thank yous up front rather than at the end. You know, thank you to my colleagues who I'm about to introduce. They've got a lot more interesting topics and information to talk to you about than I have. But you know, this has been an enormous amount of work, not just from those colleagues on this call today who are going to spend their time talking to you, but also behind the scenes putting this event together. It's been long envisaged, long thought through, and hopefully is going to be really insightful for you all. So just from my perspective, you know, I am in 2020. I am DWP's Chief Commercial Officer, but for many years preceding this, I was the lead commercial business partner to digital, and as a category of spend and as an area of spend for DWP, very close to my heart. So you know, delighted to still be involved in this, and you know, we've envisaged our ability to be able to talk to you about our strategy, our direction. You know, I can't remember the number of times, some of you on this call maybe, or meetings I've had where I've been asked, you know, what is it that DWP are looking to do, because that'll make it a lot easier to engage. And this is the sort of macro response to that question that hopes to help you understand what that is, but also help us both, because, you know, we want to field proposals, ideas, engagement with the IT market that is focused on DWP strategy, not you floundering in the dark to try and work out what we might need. So that's the dual purpose, and certainly, as we say, the start of a conversation, but an awful lot of clarity that's been pulled together to try and guide you to where DWP is going over the coming years. So on to the next slide, please. I'm just going to introduce my colleagues. I'll shortly be handing over to Simon McKinnon, who's the Chief Digital Information Officer for DWP, and Simon will give you an introduction to, you know, DWP overall and the digital function. We'll then get into the real heart of this presentation, which is Nick, Helen, and Mike going to talk to you about digital, our strategy, our real key focus areas, and hopefully that's going to be the insight you need to really start to think about what's important to DWP and what part you can play in that, because, you know, this is very clearly an open invitation that whilst DWP Digital has been transforming for a number of years and continues to do so, and we want to be a function that's highly capable and leading in our delivery, you know, this is very much the invitation that says we are still and will continue to be very reliant and very interested in working with the market to deliver our outcomes. They'll then hand on to Simon King, who's going to talk to you about our digital innovation strategy. This is very much emerging, and again, you can see how we want to explore digital innovation going forward, and the parts that you can play in that. And then finally, thank you to Louise, who's done an awful lot of work. Sorry, my dog is barking. Henry did say that was a possibility. So Louise, who's done a brilliant work. Thank you, Louise, in pulling this together. It's fantastic. Louise heads up the commercial digital in-life management team, and the in-life management meaning that putting in place contracts and arrangements with suppliers is just the start of that journey, and how we manage those through the life is really, really important for us. So Louise will talk about how we do that, how we envisage doing that, and how we want to maintain that, but also really importantly take you through the next steps after this session, and how you can join with us and take advantage of the information we're sharing with you today. So hopefully that's a useful intro. I will hand over to you, Simon, and I look forward to being involved in the Q&A at the end.
Thank you very much, Matthew. DWP, many of you will know something about us, but often we find that people fail to understand the scale and the criticality of what we do. One of our non-executive directors once described us as the glue of the British society, which I think is rather a grand way of describing our role. But we're responsible essentially for the delivery of all of the welfare benefits, the pensions policy and delivery of state pension, and for the delivery of child maintenance policy. And we're tackling some of the most critical social, economic and financial challenges in the UK. And that purpose, of course, has become very much more core to the government's position as we go through the current pandemic. Now, we have a very important purpose in helping people lift themselves out of poverty and keeping them out of poverty. Every day, as an example, we help almost 10,000 people move off one of our benefits, job seekers allowance, as we help them back into work. 10,000 a day. Every year we move 3.6 million people off that benefit. We help 4 million people every year find new job vacancies, and we deliver those benefits to nearly 7.5 million benefit claimants each year. And in fact, across the range of the benefits we provide, we serve something like 22 million people in our society who directly or indirectly receive the benefits that we provide. In child maintenance, for example, we collected or arranged for the sharing of about £1.2 billion worth of child maintenance payments, which supported 900,000 children who otherwise may not have the life chances that getting them child maintenance provides. And we pay about £130 billion per year of state pension, nearly £200 billion a year of all of the benefits that we provide. And as a government department, we're probably the largest department with somewhere between 80 and 100,000 employees. So the scale of what we do is really critical. And we are immensely proud of the contribution we make to society. And most people who work in DWP are passionate about trying to provide the best services that we can to the citizens, claimants and customers that depend on us. But if I look on what's happening in DWP Digital, and if you care to move to the next slide, thank you. We focus our work really in 4 areas. And the first one is making sure that we provide reliable services that meet our users' needs. Many of the systems we provide are deemed to be part of the core national infrastructure, and we need to ensure that we provide a high level of availability to those services, and that we keep the large amounts of citizen people data secure at all times. We're also trying to work out how we can exploit the new technologies that are emerging in this marketplace, how we can exploit the data that we hold internally or can obtain from third parties, and how we can look at sharing services within and between government departments to build more efficient, more effective, more creative solutions. And we'll talk a lot about that as we go through this afternoon's session. To do that, it's important for us to build our capability. We probably have one, if not the largest digital function in central government. We employ nearly 4,000 people internally and use an awful lot of third-party services as well to cover the many benefits and the systems that support them that we have. And we've done an awful lot of work over the last few years in building up our own internal capability to lead the delivery of digital solutions, which in the past we may have been more highly dependent on third parties. But the scale of what we need to deliver means that we need to continue to build really strong relationships with suppliers, because there is no way that we can deliver all of our ambitions just with our own capabilities. The scale of our ambition is such that we will continue to need more support from the private sector. And the fourth of our goals is about looking at how we can use digital services to transform the way in which we deliver this business. We have to deliver our policy needs as they emerge from government. One of the projects we're working on at the moment is standing up the Kickstart service, which will provide about £2 billion worth of support for long-term young unemployed people and trying to get them back into work. And that's just one of about 100 different services that the DWP provides. So a huge scale. But we do have a legacy set of legacy systems that we need to move forward, and we do need to make sure that we deliver digital services efficiently for taxpayers. And so when you talk about what our future transformation is going to be, you'll see that we are trying to work out how we can deliver a better experience for claimants, making our services much more user focused, but we can also make those a better experience both for the people who work in our organisation, but also for taxpayers, and making sure that we deliver our services efficiently. So we are about to embark, in fact we've already started embarking on a really ambitious transformation of the department. If you go to the last slide for me, please. So this, I think, is one of the UK's biggest digital transformations. We are ambitiously looking at how we can exploit digital services as we go through the next spending review that the government is currently preparing for. We have a large estate and we have a lot of services that we need to improve, and we need to think of new ways in which we can deliver those services. Part of the experience of the last 6 months, as we've been responding to COVID, has shown us how critical this transformation will be. Over the last 6 months, we've had to step up enormously in terms of the way in which we deliver services, and we have released a number of new digital services into use with our claimants, which has shown us the opportunity that we have for accelerating our digital ambitions. And what my colleagues and I are trying to talk about as we go through the rest of this session is to describe the nature of our future ambition, what we want to achieve, how we want to achieve it, and to invite you to contribute to how you think we might be able to make that progress. So with that, I'd like to hand on to look at the strategic themes. And I think, Nick, are you going to pick this one up?
I am, Simon. Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. So I would like, as Simon has said, I'd like to pick up the strategic themes and try and place our transformation in some context. Next slide, please, Henry. So as Simon mentioned earlier, we are in the process of our comprehensive spending review submission to, and I'm just using this slide, which was one of our slides in that process, just to point out and really bring to life how current all of this thinking is. So you really are hearing what we are thinking right now. I'm not going to read through this slide line by line. I'm sure you're pleased to hear, but what this triangle is trying to draw out is we have a strategic ambition within the DWP that is fully aligned at the most senior levels of the business, which has our overall strategic ambition. And then we're trying to break that down into some strategic themes around what we can do to digitalize the organization, how that will in turn improve customer experience, and how that will improve the way we work with our staff and how we handle our data. And then the third level in this diagram obviously shows how that breaks down into individual areas of work. And beneath this layer, there are then individual projects and programs being developed, some of which I think Helen will talk about later. But the key point I wanted to draw out using this slide was that we have multiple layers of thinking within the DWP, from a coordinated, holistic strategy right down to individual pieces of work. So this is really a very joined up transformation story for the department that goes from individual work items right through to delivering this strategic ambition. We do not believe we can deliver this in the time period of a sort of single spending review. This is a multi-year journey, and we really are inviting you to be at the beginning. Next slide, please. So we're starting off with these three sort of key propositions, but these in no way are obviously the entirety of what we're trying to do, but it's just to give you a flavor of some of the directions of travel we are on. And I think if I was to summarize it in the most simple way, I would say we are definitely pivoting the organization to a much more customer-centric view. So we are trusting customers to drive their own journey through self-service, through digitization. We'll be using data to personalize those journeys where we can. The second overarching driver really is about connecting across our services. And those of you who've worked with us before will know we have a series of really rather discrete systems built around the delivery of individual policies at the moment. We definitely want to make those into work in a much more holistic way. For example, if you tell us once about a change in your circumstances, we want to be able to reflect that across our entire estate. And that really will need us to drive enormous amounts of automation in our back office systems, but also to offer self-service opportunities to people coming to us, which involves our full omni-channel, rich channel experience. Next slide, please, Henry. So there are lots of consequences for us not getting this right. And again, I'm not going to read this slide, but there are a lot of things we associate with our current discrete siloed systems which don't talk to each other across from one to another. These are all things that at one time or another we have experienced errors due to timing issues or miscalculation or agents individually doing things and not being consistent. We essentially, a lot of the problems associated with our current situation are to do with this unjoined up nature, and that's really why we are trying to move to this more holistic, planned approach. Next slide, please, Henry. So again, I'm just really going into a little bit more detail on that previous slide. We have a very complex policy landscape. We have over 150 policy products supported by over 300 applications. Certainly when you compare us with an organization like DVLA, for example, which effectively just issues driving licenses and fines, they have a very linear model. We have a very complex one, which, as Simon said, goes right from the state pension right through to child maintenance and all of the rest of the welfare state in between. Each of those bits of that infrastructure has been built separately. We have almost every imaginable computer language, an awful lot of different hardware stacks. So you'll begin to pick up the consistent point in my message of this is around trying to bring consistency to a rather discoordinated situation currently. Next slide, please, Henry. again, just this slide is just touching on the issues of our legacy environment that Simon mentioned at the beginning. We still do have a considerable legacy estate. It is aging fast. A lot of these systems now require extremely rare skills that are not being taught anymore. They are very closed, they don't provide a very good user experience, and they are extremely expensive for us to maintain. And a lot of these systems are really only systems of record, and the process around them is still entirely paper-based. We still really receive enormous amounts of white mail that is scanned. Essentially, we need to move ourselves into a more digital situation. Next slide, please. So we have a relatively simple transition proposition. We want to move from where we are today, which is largely a manual business, to a business that is fully automated, except where it needs to have human input. We're currently doing almost all the work is delivered by colleagues, and if we move to the bottom, and it's aided by IT systems, whereas we want to move to a situation where we are a digital business, where our colleagues are simply providing the expert advice where that is needed. Next slide, please. Yes, I think now I'll ask my colleague Helen to talk a little bit about where we are today and what we're doing right now.
Great, thank you very much, Nick. Hi, everyone. So hopefully what you've heard so far is just a description of the size and scale of the department, an understanding of what our ambition is and where we're taking ourselves to in the future, and some glimpses of where we're currently at. So if you could move on to the next, I'm just going to spend the next few minutes helping ground where we are right now. So as Simon inferred at the beginning, we have bold ambitions, but we're not right at the start of that journey in all spaces. And it's safe to say that some of our service lines are mature in terms of where we're headed to, how we're digitalizing, how we're improving customer experience, and how we're making the lives of our service delivery colleagues better than it was previously. And others are right at the start of that process. So if we capture that on this lovely arrow diagram, we call ourselves in startup phase to a degree. We're finding projects that help particular service lines deliver those services better than they were previously. But what we're really trying to push towards is getting the learning out of that, understanding where we've got similar problem statements appearing in multiple areas. We can tackle those problems once and reuse that solution multiple times so that we can really accelerate our transformation and take us in the direction that Simon and Nick have described. So we've had a big surge of activity that has taken place over the last few years, but specifically over the case of the last few months, triggered, as I'm sure you would imagine, as a response to the pandemic and the turmoil that has thrown society into, let alone our own organisation. So I'll speak to some of the specifics around what we've done over the last period in the future. But if I can ask you to just hold in your minds that we see ourselves very much at the start of, we're trying to do things differently. We've got a good transformation agenda in front of us. We're going to learn as we go. We're going to go through interim stages on the way. We're going to scale, build evidence, build learning and understanding, capture investment based on proven experience of delivering things better. And by the end of that, get to bring 2025 vision to life with a radically transformed version of the department, which has better citizen experience at its heart, a better colleague experience along the way, and is cheaper for taxpayers to boot. So nothing small to go after there. If we could move on to the next slide, please. Nick's already introduced you to the pyramid, which shows that alignment, shows how we're bringing these things together. And I'm just going to touch on these in a little more detail to hopefully help understand where we're really looking for help, where we're focusing our attention, and what it means for us right now. So in terms of digitalization, this is the idea of, from top to bottom, looking at how we deliver our benefits out to citizens and understanding what changes need to be made along the way. So it starts with policy. Where can we work with our policy colleagues to simplify the way in which we're expected to get money to people who are eligible to receive it? And we've already had some examples quite recently where built into our regulations and our approach is actually in terms of us making the transformation that we've signed up to. So in regulations, for example, it may be specific in saying that we're going to deliver a certain benefit via post or on the telephone. Or if you're trying to stand up an online journey, that's quite tricky when at the moment there isn't actually a mandate to do that. So what we've been able to do, again, largely in response to the pandemic, is a whole package of changes that were pushed through that have actually really helped us push forward with this agenda in a way that, frankly, we weren't expecting to do until that time was available later in the parliamentary timetable. So you can see the intent from policy then drives us into, right, so if we can simplify our policy agenda, what does that mean for our service delivery? We take a look at the end-to-end service journey right now. We understand whether or not that's the simplest version of that journey, and where it isn't, we start to design out some of the complexity. And for those steps that are left, we then look to automate where we possibly can. So if we have data available that helps us make what can be an automated decision, we will try and get access to it, make use of it, and be clear around how we've used that data to drive that decision. Where there are steps that require more judgment or human interaction, then we will make that as simple as possible for our operational staff and service delivery colleagues to go through that step into the next part of the journey. And the ultimate aim, as much as we possibly can, is to get to the nirvana of straight through processing. So this idea that a citizen knows that they're in the right place, can apply online or via telephone, whichever channel suits their needs, and go straight through from that process to receiving payment into their bank account, should they be eligible to get that payment, without ever having to talk to us as a department. So we have managed to achieve that in recent times on the state pension service. We have pockets of it on other service lines as well. But what we're signing up to now is a big push towards doing that as much as we possibly can for as many services as we possibly can in the future. So when we talk about automating processes, it's not just the bit in the middle, it's end to end. What does this mean for our services, and what does that mean for citizens who are in receipt of them? We've not touched on it as much yet, but it really is relevant always for our department, but especially at the moment, and that's fraud reduction and error reduction as two slightly distinct but related things. So of course we're handling money and we're paying money out to people, and unfortunately that does mean that we're quite attractive to fraudsters. So the more that we can do to grasp onto new technologies and new approaches in surfacing where fraud is more likely to be taking place, and helping colleagues identify that, or frankly helping ourselves prevent that in the first instance, is always going to be a hot topic for DWP. It's especially true at the moment where, if you think about the environment we're in, we have more citizens in contact with our services. So we have a higher volume of people using these things for the first time. That can lead to heightened error rates. It can lead to inadvertent mistakes being made on applications and through the process. So understanding and triaging where that might be going on and helping our service delivery colleagues understand that better is seen as something that's really important for us right now. And similarly, we have service delivery colleagues who are working on service lines they never thought they would be a few months ago. We have as an organisation had to prioritise our effort where the need is greatest. And that means that we have colleagues who are learning to process those services for the first time, and indeed a whole load of new people joining the organisation in order for us to cope with that demand. That means that if we can keep things as simple as possible for them, we have a better chance of reducing error rates along the way. So the more we can think about digitalisation, the more we can think about keeping things simple and taking fraud and error out of the system as much as possible. From the citizen theme, the citizen perspective, our intention is to allow citizens to contact us through the channels that serve them best. We believe that the preferential channel for many, but not all, is a digital online channel, given largely by the way in which people interact across society on so many other services. And our aspiration is that wherever possible, we provide an online ability for people to be in contact with the organisation and get the outcome that they're after. Again, I'll talk about some specifics a little later on, but we are really pushing in this direction to make sure that if people are using this channel, we can help our service delivery colleagues then cover off the other channels more capably. So for those who would rather use the telephone or contact us in a different way, we're better able to stand up our support for that. So again, this isn't about one channel favoured over another. It's about us putting good services in place across all in order for us to serve citizens based on their requirements. You can imagine at the moment, a big push over the last few months has been about face-to-face contact. So processes that would historically have been done in full view of a DWP person and a citizen, we're trying to find new ways of doing that. And we have got video trials in many job centres. And we've started to stand up online ways for people to do things that typically they would have had to come into an organisation to do. So work in progress, but the ambition is to stand up multiple channels across all of these things. In terms of customer understanding, we want to be really transparent about how decisions are made and whereabouts in a process somebody's claim is up to. So the number of calls that we get into the department, and Simon mentioned the overall volume right at the start of this presentation, is massive. And many of those calls are chasing information about where their claim is up to. You know, when am I going to get my next payment? When is it due? How much is it? Well, honestly, if we can trust somebody's identity, then we will be able to provide that information much more readily than we're able to do, and not necessarily reliant on somebody picking up the phone or being on the end of another channel. So we are looking to understand how we can get information more clearly out in front of people so that they don't have to get in touch with us as a department and chase for that information as they do right now. Sorry, I do have a little noise on the line. Could I ask people to mute, please, where possible? Thank you. The final piece is around data. So this is where we have a huge amount of data as an organisation, and even more when you consider other government departments. We have started to understand the power of that data and to share it much more readily across both our own service lines and across government. But there is much more to do in this space. And the rationale behind it is that if a customer tells us something once, then if we need to know that for multiple reasons, we can share that information much more easily and create a more joined up experience for citizens along the way. So there's more work to be done in this space. And, you know, we spoke about this progression, but our expectation is that we will use data much more in the future. We will invest in it as a foundation of our transformation, and we will surface it so it's of much greater use both for citizens and for operational staff along the way. So hopefully that brings to life a few of the bottom layers of the pyramid that Nick spoke about earlier. If we could just pop onto the next slide, please. Thank you. There are some real world examples, and I'll be honest, I picked 3 because 3 fit on the slide, but I could have picked a dozen or 20 or 30. There's been so many activities that have happened in response to the pandemic specifically, whereby our operational teams have been diverted into the area of most need. And that's very deliberate and very considered. What it's meant that is that our transformation has really accelerated in those service lines that were left less well attended than they would have been normally. And I mentioned a regulation change earlier. You know, pension credit is a service line that was not able to be offered digitally because of the regulations. They were changed. The service was stood up in a number of weeks, and the citizens have taken to the channel in a way that actually, when you look at digital propensity, was quite surprising. So we've now got an online channel for the very first time for pension credits, and you know, over half of the claims are now being made via that route in a way that I really don't believe would have happened had we not had the environment we've been working in over the last few months. Similarly, for child maintenance, this actually was already in flight, and I spoke about the different points of maturity along the way. You know, our child maintenance transformation has been going on for many years. We actually had a service stood up to receive child maintenance applications online. It wasn't the primary channel. It was out there in trial. And as a response to operational activity being diverted elsewhere, it became pretty much the only channel running in terms of child maintenance. Now, the response and the satisfaction with that channel is really high. The number of operational staff needed to provide support for child maintenance applications is way lower. And basically, it's being seen now as the primary route for us to continue with as a department. And similarly, and finally, as an example, debt management. So many people have received money during this period and have then happily found themselves back into work and off benefit again and wanting to pay that money back. Historically, the only way to do that would have been to pick up the phone and try to get hold of a debt management person who would then have processed that claim on their behalf and taken the payment into the department. What we've been able to stand up for the very first time for the department is an online version of that, so people can make their own card payments And that's really small. It's really new. I'm very proud of it because it's only gone out in the last few weeks. But it means that for a very defined group of people at the moment, they are able to go online, use their card, pay off the amount of money they're able to, and we get that money back into the department, and that person is no longer somebody that's going through their debt management process. So again, small numbers at the moment, but one we're hopeful for the future. And hopefully, those examples just bring to life a little of what we've been able to do right now in the spirit of our strategic transformation that we've heard about earlier on. Just on to the next slide, please, Henry. So summarising before we hear a little bit more about how we're doing this, our priorities right now, as always, are about making sure those that are entitled to the money get it, and they get it accurately and at a pace that gives them it when they need it. So first and foremost, we need to get people money. We believe that doing that in a digital way, automating decisions where possible, making payment automatically where possible, and that nirvana of straight through processing I spoke about is the way to go with this. And we're taking steps there, but we need help. Giving people choice over how they interact with us. I've spoken at length about self-service. Have touched on digital channels more than anything else. We're doing the same through telephony. We're starting to look at things like chatbots for those that love or loathe them. We're going to give it a go and see what people think. But we are trying to offer more options for people coming into the contact with the department. We want to make sure that people can engage with us in a spirit of what they really need. Some people need much more support than others. We have to be able to cater for all, and that will always be a part of our role and remit. Ultimately, we know that we aspire to get people into work faster for those that are able to work, and having access to the services we offer in order to do that is the most important way we can make that happen. And the final one there, and one we've not really touched on, is volume, service, resilience, demand. We are a department that has been in receipt of much more contact than we would have done 6 months ago. We're very proud about the way the services have stood up so far, but we know that there is more work needed in order to make sure they continue to do so in the future. And so again, we're looking for help across these areas in the spirit of our strategic transformation to really drive us forward into that future vision. I'm just going to hand over to Mike Ratcliffe now. He heads up our architecture team, and he's going to bring it to life a bit more from a technical perspective. So Mike, thanks very much. Over to you.
Thank you, Helen. Good afternoon, everyone. Henry, if you could just go on to the next slide. Clearly, you've heard the priorities and kind of our transformation ambition in terms of how we go forward. And the work we've been doing really is try and work out what's the architecture of the future that will support that. So how do we get into a world where we kind of reduce the complexity, remove the duplication, and kind of service an architecture that meets our needs better? What we're trying to do is kind of, this is the shape of the architecture and our architecture vision, and I'll run through some of the detail of this. Where we've thought about how we get more reuse and join up in the services, we started to think about what are the common capabilities that we need. Yeah, and that's really the lower green layer that you can see on the diagram there. So we've thought about what are the common capabilities we need, and across lines of benefits, and that's the green zone. As Helen's just described there, we've also talked about how we get a more joined up experience both for our staff and agents and for our users in the community. And that's really the orange layer at the top, which is really our user interface level. So it's kind of how do we get a joined up approach so people see the same data that they're trying to touch. We do recognize, though, that each benefit line will have its own unique parts to make it work, and its own parts and its own data. And that's really the blue zone layer where the specific applications for the specific benefits will be. And as Simon said at the start, we're part of government, and we can see some of the services and some of the data that we want will ultimately be in cross-government. So strangely, these coloured layers have now become an adopted language in some ways inside the department. So if you ever join a conversation where somebody describes the green zone or the blue zone, this should demystify that area for you. Clearly, it's kind of our challenge now is about how we shift the balance from where we are today into these. So Henry, if you go on to the next slide, please. So in terms of that architectural shape, what's our vision for it? And it really is about building these cohesive cross-product experiences. We recognize we're going to have to put some automation inside these systems to make them work. Yeah. But really the key point here is that we want a reactive, loosely coupled architecture that is event-driven. Yeah. And that means we'll be looking to build things like microservices at an enterprise scale. We're looking to implement choreography over orchestration. We suspect we're going to move to eventual consistency. As these are services, we see this being as smart endpoints and dumb pipes. Yeah, and clearly we want to use lots of open standards wherever we can. But what we must do is underpin this by consistent data models where we can reuse and share the data, as Helen described there, to stop re-asking our customers the same information over and over again. If you could please, Henry. Clearly that's talked about the application space and the application capabilities that we see ourselves building. But underpinning that, we recognize that we also need to mature our technical architecture underneath that. So our infrastructure, our security models. Again, we have a large amount of diversity across the estate today, and lots of the work we're trying to do is build a framework for how we effectively rationalize our devices, our servers, our networks. How do we bring that and reduce the duplication and complexity in that estate? Clearly, we'll look to use cloud where we can, where it's appropriate. Will we ever be purely cloud? We don't know. Again, we're looking for kind of what others' views on that are, but clearly there's a desire to reduce our footprint. So we're trying to underpin our applications with a consistent, reusable technical architecture, where again we've reduced complexity and diversity. If you could please, Henry. So again, what we're talking about is standard network points, automation in terms of how we run our services too. So today, lots of our services need lots of operational intervention to run them. We want more self-management of those systems, for them to be self-healing, and the tools around that to make it work. It's about reusable standard capabilities and patterns wherever we can. Yeah, and we want security to be designed in from the start. Typically today, we put lots of security in at the end, and that tends to be a problem for us. So we recognize that we need to build security in from the start. And clearly we want to optimize what we're using. We want on a consumption basis to pay for what we're using, rather than over supplying ourselves in terms of what we use in terms of hardware and software. Moving on, Henry. So what are the key principles then behind the architecture, and what do they lead us to? I won't read all this, but you can see we're looking to kind of transform the architecture that we've got. We're not looking to do a single platform. I don't think we can ever do that. I think it's about taking away some of the monoliths historically that we've had and moving us more to microservices. That will give us more agility. What we have learned through COVID is that we need to be more agile in terms of how we can respond. Yeah, we recognise that our services should be more single purpose. Sorry. So notifications we should just be doing for notifications. Payments, we should be concise with what we're doing with payments. That will allow us to kind of reuse and repurpose those services. Loose coupling, though, is key for us. We don't want large interdependent systems. That generally is how programs start to creak and fail. So we're trying to get that separation of service. Orchestration over choreography. I think that's actually wrong. It should be choreography over orchestration is really what we're trying to get to. And if you move me on. Why would we do this in lots of ways? And it's kind of feeding back to the model and the pyramid that Nick and Helen talked about. If we have these common services, if we have the shared data, if we have a common user experience, then we're going to get a much more integrated experience wherever they come from. It will shift the needs to become more customer focused as opposed to operating the machine to make DWP work. Lots of our staff time is to make DWP the machinery work today. I think there is more sharing. We recognize that we do far too much data capture with far too little information sharing, and we don't use that data as much as we could. Yeah, I think as we move to reactive event-driven architecture, that will give us more real-time performance and will help our customers understand what's going on, as well as our staff. I think the key thing around the services will allow us to be more flexible in how we deliver those services, and we'll automate those as well. Again, there's a desire to move away from the batch. So lots of our processing today is very much end of day batch, overnight processing, weekend processing. Our aim is to move to more real-time processing, and so that we can effectively get to more digital service in terms of helping our customers. Digital service, Helen's talked about the assisted digital, how we bring people in and bots. So we'll see how we go with those. And what we're really trying to do is understand how we deliver this in a more coordinated way. Yeah. So that we can see how the projects inside the DWP come together in one cohesive way to actually make sure we deliver things. And clearly, from hopefully what you've heard today, we're keen to innovate how we do some of these things. So we're in the early days of this and we're trying to find our way through this. So we are trying to find innovative ways of doing this. If you could please, Henry. What we've listed here are some of the areas where we hope you might be able to help us. This is a list of areas that we think our architecture needs and demands, and where we're hoping for innovative and different approaches where we have them. I'll let you read the list, but you can see it's all in the event space, the API, the loose coupling space. It's how do we build UIs from a variety of ways in doing that? How do we build in security in an event-based architecture? And then some of the fraud stuff that Helen was describing earlier about how do we do fraud detection, those kind of things. So we're looking for kind of innovative solutions that we could look to adopt inside our architecture that we could potentially deploy. And I think that might be me, Henry. So in terms of that innovation, it's probably worth handing over to Simon King. Do you want to take over?
Hi, good afternoon. Thanks, Mike. Good afternoon, everybody. So concluding this presentation from Digital, I'd like to talk to you briefly about the DWP Innovation Lab. As we've just been hearing, the department's appetite for innovation has probably never been greater, and the Innovation Lab plays a part in that effort, looking slightly further out, but always keeping an eye on the strategic objectives of the organization. And today, as you're probably aware, more and more organizations in both the public and the private sector are forming innovation labs to bolster their innovation effort. I read recently a survey from Gartner that found that something like 89% of organizations they surveyed who had an active innovation program had an innovation lab. So what do we mean by an innovation lab? Henry, if you could change the slide, thank you. Well, DWP, or Innovation Lab, really is a framework for rapidly generating ideas and turning them into value within the organization. And specific to what we're talking about today, there are two related objectives which I think are essential. Firstly, bringing in a range of diverse thinking, often with external partners. And secondly, promoting the overall culture of innovation. And if we could switch to the next slide, Henry. DWP Innovation Lab has a blended approach. We work with a core multidisciplinary team and a range of outside partners, including corporates, academia, SME, and other government departments. We typically work in 6 to 8 week projects with 1 week sprints. We always begin with design thinking methodologies to ground our work in user needs and fresh approaches to the problems. And crucially, we focus on the development of a working prototype that explores the technology used and examines the problem at hand. Since the summer, we've begun to really scale up that work, typically working on 2 to 3 concurrent projects spanning all the areas of the department. And if we could move to the next slide, please, Henry. Just to pick 2 recent examples of nearly 90 proofs of concept that have been done. Recently, the team has been working on using video as part of a citizen identity verification process, while our virtual work coach project leveraged technologies like machine learning to create a vision of how people could gain substantive help in their search for work through digital channels. Next slide, please. As I mentioned earlier, part of the role of the Innovation Lab is to assist in bringing new thinking into the organization and, more widely, playing an active part in the overall innovation ecosystem. So here are 3 ways in which we can do that, really working with you and organizations like you. First, our technology radar seeks to raise awareness of potentially new transformative technology that could assist government. Secondly, we work with a range of partners in delivering proof of concepts based on use cases across the department. And thirdly, and not forgetting this, we're keen as a department to remain open to new ways of working, as well as sharing with others what's worked for us. So we're always open to a dialogue with others. Finally then, thank you for listening. And I'd like to hand over to Louise, who will be talking through with you what's happening next.
Thanks, Simon. Good afternoon, everyone. So we've talked a lot about what we're doing and how we're doing it, and now I'm going to talk to you about how we can support you and ourselves in doing this. So I'm going to talk about in-life management and supplier relationship management. So if you can turn to the next slide, please, Henry. So in-life management, or ILM, as it's sometimes called, will be a term that many of you will have heard of, and it covers the end-to-end life cycle of contract management from pre-market engagement through to implementation of the contract and beyond. So the ILM team are here to support all stakeholders, so whether internal or external, through this life cycle. So this will cover our contract managers, the supplier relationship managers, and our operational supplier managers, digital, and yourselves as the suppliers. We'll also look at ensuring that the correct processes, standards and governance are provided so that this enables all parties a smooth transition through their engagement. Next slide, please, Henry. So the Supply Relationship Management Programme began in government 2 years ago. I'm privileged to say I joined DWP 2 years ago from private sector, where I've been in digital for 25 years, and I've really enjoyed being part of implementing this Supply Relationship Programme. We've had some great successes so far. And now our supply relationship management provides a front door into DWP and digital, directing you through the network to the right stakeholders on offers of help and your general engagement. SRM also provides a coordination point for supplier and government events, enabling the sharing of strategy and innovation as we're doing today. The team is also there to make life easier for you, so in navigating wider government networks and entry into government. So we'll also support you with framework queries, SRM and SME engagement, and understanding new government policies and linking into our commercial team. All we ask is that you use the front door process, as this will make sure you don't miss anything vital and that we include you in anything that's important to you. Next slide, please, Henry. So none of this can happen unless we work collaboratively as a true virtual team. As your customer, we want to set out our commitment to our real relationship with you and create healthy, positive partnerships where innovation can thrive and where embedding the right behaviours, as you can see here, can result in a win-win situation. Next slide, please, Henry. So I now want to take you through the next steps for today. Next slide, please. So today we've talked you through our strategy and we've told you how we want your help. What we'll do as a result of today is share the presentation and also a response form via email. So that will come out to you through Tech UK. What we'll ask you is that in the next couple of weeks, we'd like you to respond to us using our front door. So you can see there the email address for the front door within the next 2 weeks. We'll then review those submissions, and within the 2-week period we'll aim to start providing feedback to you. Post this, should we want to take any of these offers forwards, we will be in touch and then we will be able to have follow-up meetings with you. We will be doing this every 6 months, so this is the first one and hopefully you have enjoyed this. And if you can go to the next slide, Henry. Just a reminder there of everything that we've asked for your offer of help with today. We will be sharing the slides so that you won't have to write these all down. Okay, if you move to the next slide, please, Henry. And I'll hand over to Henry now for the panel Q&A.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Louise, and indeed thank you, Simon, Mike, Helen, Nick, Simon and Matthew, for what I think we would all agree it was a thoroughly comprehensive and really interesting presentation. And I imagine most of the suppliers dialing in would feel that's exactly what they would like to hear. I think we're all quite impressed by your ambition and indeed your openness to innovation, to accessing new thinking, and to your approach to engaging with the market, which is, as I said earlier, exactly the sort of thing we like to see. And as you had on your slide, Louise, that sort of, if it can move from less of a transactional relationship to more of a partnership in delivering that mission, I think that would be a great outcome for all. With that, so we do have, as you'll see on the slide, all our speakers from the session available on the panel to answer your questions. As I mentioned, there are two ways to submit questions. Please either pop something in the chat function, which I can then read out to the panel for them to address, or if you'd rather, do just raise your hand by clicking the hand symbol, and I'll call on you to come off mute and ask your question. And we've got our first one, Jean-Francois. If you'd like to take yourself off mute.
Yeah, good afternoon. Jean-François Perras from Google Cloud. Thank you so much for sharing that information, that detailed information, and as well to structure a very simple way to engage with DWP, especially when you're new in the account. My question is, you've talked about your journey to deliver an exceptional multi-channel customer experience where you balance citizen cost and policy outcomes. What I would like, if you could give us an overview about what you've done so far, what needs to be delivered in the near future, and what I'm very interested in is what's your strategy to make it happen?
Thank you, Jean-Francois. I don't know if Helen, you perhaps want to take that one?
No problem at all. Thank you, Jean-Francois, for the question. So I think if I was characterising our approach historically, when we think channels, we go straight to online. And it's sort of there's an old way of doing things that's typically telephony or face-to-face for the sort of a work search type activity. And when we think about modernising, we think, well, we'll do that online. And when we're talking now about a more joined up citizen experience, we really want to be able to offer, consistency regardless of how citizens interact with us. Now, what we've found is for us, and I'm interested in everyone's thoughts on this, the key step in all of this is around proving identity and trusting identity, regardless of the channel in which it comes in. So if somebody, bearing in mind we're paying money out the door, so at a point in our process, we need to have confidence that the person who's interacting with us is the person we want to give money to, assuming that's how that results. So what we've found is that our first and immediate effort is around identity. So how best do we prove that regardless of channel? How do we interact across channels once someone has proven their identity such that we can trust it on an ongoing basis? And that's become the sort of immediate activity spanning over the last sort of year and into the next, really, to make sure that we're putting that in full focus. I think there is a bit of a push, I'm really simplifying the story, but telephony is our primary channel still. And so what we're actually also trying to do is seeing how we can almost keep the citizen experience high with telephony, but take out operational effort in support of that. So where we're able to automate, those simple queries that I spoke about, those chasing calls that I spoke about, where we're able to do that differently alongside a better online experience. Those two things together is really where we're at right now. I don't know if anyone else wants to build on that at all, but that would be my take. Thanks for the question.
Yeah, I would just add to that, Helen. Thank you, Nick. I would just add to say that the channel experience and the sort of customer interaction is obviously our most important outward-facing efforts, but an awful lot of our current planning and current effort is really focused on sort of automating the machine, as it were. We have an enormous amount of manual effort in our processes, many of which could be automated, really freeing up but both our own staff time and also improving the customer experience by removing delays. So I would say there's a sort of twin track effort almost in the department between massively improving our customer experience and our customer interaction, as Helen's described, but also a phenomenal effort on fixing that sort of back office automation.
Brilliant. Thank you, Nick, and thanks so much, Helen, as well. Jean-Francois, I hope that answers your question. Thanks for asking it. I think now we'll go to Joseph from Mvine. I think had his hand up next. If you'd like to take yourself off mute. If you'd like to take yourself off mute if you could. Failing that, we'll come to... Oh, there you go.
Very much. Henry, can you hear me okay now?
Oh, we can.
Thank you very much. Sorry for that. Henry, could the speakers please offer a few words each on the impact of combining BPDTS into DWP Digital? Would that kibosh the chances of private sector technology businesses working with DWP Digital, or would it stimulate it? Thank you.
Let me take that one. So the first thing is to explain what BPDTS is. BPDS is a wholly owned company that DWP set up in order to help it build its capacity to deliver digital services. So the consequence of deciding that we can operate better as one organization rather than two very, very closely, almost seamlessly linked organizations is kind of immaterial in terms of what we want to do with the external market. We will have the same net capacity internally as essentially as we had before the merger. But our strategy is very much that whilst we have some internal capacity, the scale of our external ambition, the scale of our ambition will still require us to use an awful lot of third parties. Even this year, we're invested about 100 million, I think it's 93 million, additionally in our transformation agenda. And so the role of BPDS in that is largely not going to change. We will keep the sum total of our capacity will be consistent both before and after we merge with them.
Yeah, and I'd support that, and I think Joseph, I appreciate you asked for a comment from everyone, but we would be in danger of repeating ourselves. So I think I'll probably just fill that one with Simon, and just from a commercial perspective, validate. I think it's very much the same in the future as it has been to date, and this is just a different way of DWP and government operating. It certainly doesn't change opportunities to operate with the supply market, and this session is still very much guided towards that, as we described at the beginning.
Many thanks indeed, Simon and Matthew. I think and thanks for your question, Joseph. I think a pretty clear answer there from you both. So thank you, Jacqueline. If you'd like to ask your question next.
Hi, Jackie Lees from Atkins. Thank you for a really informative session and setting out your plans. I'm not sure which person to direct this question at, but I suppose obviously the Greening Government ICT and Digital Services Strategy got launched a few weeks ago, and I just wondered, because there wasn't much mention of kind of that and the Greening ICT agenda within your presentation, where you are on that journey at the moment.
Thanks, Jackie. Great question. Greening Government ICT, recent strategy, as indeed the social value procurement note was published as well. Any reflections on that?
I think it's a little early for us to have worked out our full response to that, but it is certainly something that's been very much at the core of our thoughts as we have changed our infrastructure over the last 5 years and moving to more ecological data centers and cloud services. But I take the point on board. There's always more that we could and should do, and we continue to look for opportunities to reduce our environmental impact. We already have a very strong social approach, both in terms of the services that we provide, but also as part of our culture, with many parts of the organisation reaching out voluntarily or through sponsorship from the organisation to work with third parties. So both green and social agendas are something we are keen to progress. I think it's a little early for us to have worked out our full green strategy at this point.
It's probably
Yeah.
worth saying, sorry, it was probably worth
Liz.
saying as well. So we've picked up on the social value policy, and we're certainly working with suppliers to understand what you can offer us in this space as well. So with regards to social value, we have a number of themes that we're working towards, and that is something that my team will be reaching out for to understand what's out there in the market and how you can help us to support that.
Yeah, so just to build on that slightly, and and I think it's clearly a very important question and something we're very focused on. I think from a green perspective, it's very much on DWP's radar. It has been for some time. Our estates colleagues are focusing on a really clear agenda for DWP in collaboration with the rest of government in terms of driving our zero carbon emissions footprint and those goals, and clearly digital plays a part in that, but it's very much a DWP and cross government goal. I think in terms of social value more broadly, as Louise highlights, and Louise will should be very much at the forefront of this, supporting Digital Group. We have made commitments this year that we're very clear that we want to be transparent with the public in terms of how we operate in terms of delivering against social value, but also how our suppliers support us in those goals, and that's something that those of you that are incumbents and work with us will be hearing a lot more about. We are absolutely committed to providing transparency about how we deliver against government social value goals, and I think a good question, because we will be very much seeking support and clarity from our supply partners to ensure we're all on the same agenda. So yeah, watch this space. There's lots more coming.
Brilliant, thank you all. I think absolutely great question, Jackie, and as Matthew said there, it'd be very interesting to see what we as the supplier community can do along with government in this space. So I think Pritesh Patel, I think you're next if you'd like to come on.
Yes, I'd like to just thank the panel again for a great session, informative session. I had a question for Simon King around the process by which innovations are curated and ideated into the innovation lab. And furthermore, you talked about how having to scale up a bit recently. What are your further or future plans in terms of scaling the innovation lab?
Thanks very much for the question. So really, as I set out, we've been working on getting the structure right, and that is having our sort of multidisciplinary team internally and widening the scope of partners that we can work with. Part of that has been working with our commercial team and sort of finding out how we can make that happen. And secondly, it's about what happens at the beginning and what happens at the end. At the beginning, it's about making sure that the projects that we undertake are ones which we feel are going to represent some value, and secondly, and critically for us, that they're based on some clear user need and benefit to the department, so that we're delivering user need, but also value for the taxpayer. Secondly, the sort of process that we're doing that, so we can do that rapidly and doing it with the ability to bring in sort of new thinking. And then thirdly, as we come out of that, making sure that we can articulate that, working with the wider department in terms of things that are actually going to happen. So our work recently has been about getting that right. And I think at the moment, which is why it's a very timely opportunity to talk about that, we feel we've got that right, and we're in a position to sort of scale that up. And another critical part for us and a critical part of our agenda is making sure that that we are bringing all of the best ideas into the department from technology, and not as it were being too inward facing, and which I think is concurs with the spirit of this session and what everybody else was saying. So really our plans are to scale up on that basis. So hopefully that answers some of your questions.
Yes,
Brilliant, thank you very much, Simon. And thanks so much for the question, Pritesh. And we'll go now to Simon Edwards. I think you were next.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can indeed. Thanks, Simon.
Thank you. Simon Edwards from Hewlett-Packard Enterprise. Really interesting presentation. First of all, some really forward-thinking ideas there. I think one of my main questions is around whether there's or how the panel see addressing the sort of non-technical challenges potentially with data sharing across the organisation and actually outside of your organisation as well, and some of those ambitions that you have. Have those been thought about? Because often we see those as probably being the major challenges with these types of initiatives. Just wanted to get your thoughts on that if you can.
To be a little bit more specific, Simon, about what you mean by non-technical challenges.
Sort of political with data sharing, I suppose, and obviously around security, both inside the organisation and outside with other organisations, sort of, I guess, Home Office, HMRC, some of those guys. Are they on a similar journey with you? Are they bought into this strategy with you as well as across government?
I think certainly it's true. In preparation for this CSR, the Cabinet Office has coordinated a number of cross-government initiatives to look at more broadly sort of automation. And as part of that, we've certainly had lots of conversations with other departments. And clearly those kind of data sharing issues are a concern to everybody. And obviously we are all sort of guided by and bound by GDPR, etc.
Yeah.
So we are definitely trying to deal with those questions in an ethical way. And my colleague Paul Lodge, who's our Chief Data Officer, is part of a cross-government data forum for data and ethics. It's something that obviously we are thinking about hard and plays into the part that Helen alluded to in identity being very important to us. Yeah, we are sort of fully engaged in lots of both cross-industry and cross-government conversations about data sharing, about how we can do attribute exchange rather than pure data exchange, how we deal with security. Simon King in the Innovation Lab is running a project about synthetic data at the moment. So these are all things that are kind of in our thinking, and I think I would say, whilst obviously we all have to share data in a way that is legal and secure, I don't think per se that any of those things are a barrier to developing this strategy.
Thank you.
Thank you, Simon, and thank you, Nick. And now we'll come, I think, James, I think you were next, if you'd like to ask your question. James Petchenik. Just take yourself off mute. Failing that, I think.
Was that? Sorry, you're breaking up there, Henry.
Oh, there we go, James. Fantastic. You'd like to ask the question?
From CGI. Yeah, thank you for being so clear on your requirements today. I just wish other government departments would be so clear, really. But yeah, I'm just wondering, how far along on your automation journey are you really? Is this something that DWP have been at for some time? Have you carried out any sort of readiness assessments on your journey to see what the art of the possible could be in the automation space, really?
That's a very, very long. There's a very long answer to that, James, and a short answer as well. I mean, it's a bit like the department's a bit like a curate's egg in that aspect, good in parts. Obviously, we have applications and products like Universal Credit, which we've been designed and built from the ground up in the department, where we use full agile practices, and there's an awful lot we can do and a lot we can do quickly, right through to legacy systems that are on, although we have largely moved to more modern hardware, are as designed probably from 20 or even 30 years ago. So that automation story covers right from modern applications on modern stacks right through to very old-fashioned systems in using very closed architectures, closed databases, and closing languages. So we are into the journey. We've certainly already started and had started quite some time ago, but I wouldn't underestimate how far we have to go. There is no simple answer to the question, but certainly it's we've got a big challenge ahead of us, which is why I talked about this is a more than one SR journey. So that gives you some indication. We think this is going to take us longer than 3 years.
Thank you, Nick, and thank you, James. I think we'll come to Siobhan. I think you were next with your hand up. If you could take yourself off mute.
Hi, thanks, Henry. So my question maybe is for Louise initially, but I've got a couple of questions. I'd put one in the chat about, and this is to the panel. Are there any government departments internationally where you would sort of see have best practice that you look over and think, actually, you know, they've got it right, they've done it, you know, we can learn from them? That's one question. And the second was specifically to Louise. It was a quicker question around the in-life management. Is the plan to give dedicated support to incumbent suppliers through that in-life management? I saw the email, and that's great that we've got that, but just maybe if Louise could expand on the management of incumbent suppliers, that would be great. Thank you. And thank you for the presentation today, guys. I think it's been great, the way you've opened up and told us about your strategy, so appreciate that.
Hi, Siobhan. Yeah, so as far as supplier relationship management goes, well, we do have that for our incumbent suppliers, and we do work across government as well. So with regards to understanding best practice in working with suppliers, we certainly work with our other government departments. We do have all of our suppliers have some support for them. So as well as having dedicated supplier relationship managers, our contract managers also pick up supplier relationship management activity. So we work with everybody to jointly score the relationship. So this is not just us scoring you, this is the supplier, digital, commercial. We all work together so that we can have that healthy relationship on a regular basis. So any engagement that you will have with us, we will make sure that we're always reflecting on that relationship. We're supporting. Certainly my team is available, as I said, for any questions regarding frameworks, working, networking, engagement on events or processes. You know, you're not, just because you're not incumbent doesn't mean that the front door is not open to you. The email address that's in the pack that you'll get today is our front door. So for any questions regarding anything, engagement, technology, process, we can field you to the right area. But as I say, we do want to cultivate all of our relationships. So certainly those new ones, we want to watch them grow and see what we can and do with them, basically. So no, not just focusing on current incumbents.
Okay, thanks, Louise. I mean, the reason I asked the question is, you know, I'm from Supplier, and we have a joint venture, SSCL, who would be an incumbent, but keen to extend that relationship across Supplier as well. So I'll contact you through the portal.
Excellent. And we do, we have LinkedIn already, I think, with the Crown Rep. So Lan O'Connor, you probably know well.
Yes,
so,
I know Lan.
So, yeah, excellent.
Yeah.
So happy to pick up with you outside of this.
Thank you. And my second question was around just general to the panel about best practice globally. And I think it's always good to look and share. And I wondered if there's anything that you've seen globally that you've admired and thought we need to replicate that.
I think so. From my point of view, just to give you my tuppence worth, Siobhan, I mean, I think obviously our policy colleagues have an awful lot of international contact, and as do our business strategy teams. Where I have been involved personally, I would say obviously no two government structure is quite the same, and no two government policies are quite the same. And in the sort of digital space, there's often quite a big difference depending on whether you're a country that has a national identity system already. Makes a big difference between the sort of the more Napoleonic countries as opposed to the sort of common law countries. Certainly recently we had quite a big data exchange with the German government because their welfare system is somewhat similarly structured to ours. Particularly their work kind of maintenance aspects of it. And it was quite revealing that they're in a very similar situation to ourselves, which was, I think, a surprise to both sides, really, about how similar we were in the departments that have been historically built up with a degree of legacy issues, uncoordinated, unjoined up systems. So I wouldn't say that they were any better or worse off than us, but it was a very interesting exchange of information. And again, I think the Italian government is doing a lot of interesting things, as are the Australians in certain states. So we do have a lot of dialogue, but I think it's because of the disparate nature and the slightly different starting points. It's quite hard to say here's a country that's getting it all right, but you know, certainly we are kind of quite actively exchanging information with other governments and trying to learn from them, certainly.
Yeah, excellent. And I guess we take some responsibility in bringing some of that best practice maybe to you if we've got international teams that are working with government too, and I'll make sure I try and think about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is sort of part of what this experience is around. I mean, although myself and my team have given this quite a technical focus, that I don't want to give the impression that's the only thing we're interested in. We're absolutely interested in best practice. I'm sure there are also aspects of organization, process. Yeah, this is not purely about buying kit. This is definitely, we're interested in what the market has to tell us about how we can bring about this transformation.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. And I agree, Nick. I mean, absolutely at the heart of what we're seeking to do here is use the insights, Siobhan, and around international best practice and local best practice. So yes, it will be really helpful if everyone takes away that thought.
I'm going to chip in on that one as well, if you don't mind, Siobhan. So I think it's a great question. I think it's interesting that we often look for peer comparisons and ask for help in terms of peer understanding. But as Nick's called out, you know, there's such variation actually across countries and across government setups. Actually, I think, you know, some help in making connections within the UK in organisations working of a similar size and scale and similar point in their journey is just as valuable too. So you know, it's a call for input, really, not just from a particular sector, but more broadly than that. But it's a great question, because we're never going to say no to learning from others.
No, okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Siobhan. Great question, and thank you all the panel for their answers. Matthew McStay, I think you had your hand up next. We still got time just for one or two last questions. Matthew.
Sure. Thank you, Henry. And thanks for the presentation. It's very clear vision and strategy. I guess this is a question open to the panel. The COVID-19 pandemic has undoubtedly affected ways of working, and lots of organisations are still adapting to ensure stable levels of productivity and output. Do you think that you're able to deliver the same amount of change at the same pace as well as you would have pre-pandemic?
Well, let me pick that one up. So I think you can answer this in two ways. In terms of us as a business, the evidence we're getting is that we're delivering services as productively as we were when we were more in the offices. You know, we've had to get more of our service delivery colleagues working from home. About 50,000 devices for those people who previously would only have had a desktop PC in the office in order to give them the flexibility. But I think the real question is whether us in digital have found that we're able to work in a more flexible way. And the bottom line is, yes, we have. We've probably seen, you know, although it's difficult to quantify, an increase in productivity, possibly as a result of people investing more of their what would have previously been travel time into the delivery of services. And I wonder the extent to which that's been a consequence of the need for us to deliver more services more quickly, and how sustainable that will be going onwards. But all the evidence we have so far is that a flexible way of working for most people, not all people, for most people, is working very successfully, and people are finding ways of collaborating online, whereas previously they would have collaborated in collaboration zones, essentially inside our offices. I hope that answers your question.
If I can just add one sort of slight build on that, Simon, which is I think for a geographically distributed organisation such as ourselves, we've actually experienced, I think, some very positive benefits around working in a more distributed way. The use of technologies, you know, collaboration technologies, I think, has brought us more closely together in a sort of slightly bizarre way, because everybody's in the same boat, everybody's on camera. There aren't a small group of people in one room and somebody else more remotely. So I think whilst it's been a technical challenge that we've had to overcome, I think we are reaping positive rewards. I mean, it's for me personally, I can just say, sort of, being on a voice-only phone call now seems like talking into a black hole. This has definitely sort of changed the way we work, I think.
Thank you, Simon. Thank you.
Sorry, I do apologise. I keep chipping in at the end, don't I? Well, I guess one opportunity where I would ask for help is something not yet proven, I think, which is standing up new teams successfully in this environment. And as a supplier network, I'm sure your teams are involved in that more frequently than we've experienced yet. So like you say, we've got a load of ambition in front of us. We know we're going to need more people to be part of it. Creating a safe environment where new people can come and join the party when it isn't all about physical co-location, I think is something we still need to prove ourselves through. So I completely agree with what Simon described. So far, it's been a really good success story, I would say, in terms of how the teams have adapted to the way of working. But there's still more for us to prove as we go into the next few months.
Thank you all. That's fantastic.
Thanks, Matthew. Really good question, and thank you all for answering. Spotted a question in the chat function from Trisha. So I think this one might be for you, Helen. So Trisha asks, is the team also looking at digital inclusion? If not, where does responsibility sit for those citizens who struggle to engage digitally with Gov services? Helen, I think during your bit you mentioned sort of different channels for citizens. I don't know if you want to just expand on that a little bit.
I will. Thank you. Sorry, I'm so excited that I was chipping in. I love the question because it's really dear to our hearts, and I think the point I was trying to make was so this is a presentation from Digital about a digital strategy to a degree, but actually it's about service transformation and service in the broadest sense of the word. So our belief is that as we create digital channels that help people that prefer them to engage with the department better than they can do currently, we are able to provide support and care for those who would rather engage with us in different ways. So it actually allows us to balance all of the needs across. And you can imagine our citizen group, includes people that don't naturally want to deal with us in particular ways. We need to be able to service everybody equally, and that absolutely is at the heart of the intention. So service transformation as opposed to digital transformation, and services of all types, not just online ones. But a brilliant question. It's one I'm really, really keen on.
Brilliant. Thank you, Trisha, and thanks very much, Helen. Joe Nibbs, you've just put your hand up if you would like to ask your question.
Thank you. Hi everyone, it's Jo Nibbs here from Accenture. Really appreciate the time today. Thank you very much and the opportunity to join in the discussion. I just had a quick question. Obviously there's a very ambitious digital agenda and it's going to require a lot of corresponding change from your operational colleagues, huge pivot for them as well over the next few years as they change significantly the focus and ways of working. Is there plans, Louise or others, on sort of giving them a voice in forums like this? Because I'm the amount of change to align with this strategy is quite considerable, and it'd be interesting just to hear on their plans on how they plan to do that.
Well, I'm happy to come in on that if you'd like. So this is a departmental plan, not a digital plan. The target operating model and the business strategy has been produced for the whole organisation, and the implementation of this transformation is being co-led between myself in digital and one of my other Director Generals, Emma Haddad, who runs our Service Excellence team. And we would have had some of our colleagues on this call, Victoria Filkin, who is leading on the service transformation. She's the Service Transformation Director within DWP. Would have been on this call, but she's on holiday this week.
Thanks, Joe, and thanks so much, Simon. Another question in the chat from Laura. An interesting question. I don't know if you'll be able to answer it, so feel free to say if you can't, but I think interesting question nonetheless. Laura asks, how much of what you shared, the ambition outlined in the pyramid slide is dependent on a positive outcome from the spending review, or can you deliver on this regardless? I know, Helen, you mentioned with your arrow slide about sort of building the evidence base and making the case to then secure funding via the spending review. I don't know if you or any of the panel can speak to this point.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to start off. And we've obviously worked very closely across government in terms of presenting this vision. We've been talking very closely with colleagues from Cabinet Office and from other digital data and technology functions, so that we believe we're presenting something that's fully supported by those organisations. I say that obviously you can imagine the decisions to be made during the spending review will not be easy ones, and so we're dependent on how those thought processes go and the priorities for the government at the time. That said, what we have done is got really good buy-in across our department in terms of this agenda, and so we are confident that whatever the actual amount of money that is received by the department, the steps that we want to take are the ones that we will go ahead with. It's the number we'll get through and the pace at which we take them that may vary, but the direction of travel is certainly one that is agreed, and the way that we will be headed.
Brilliant, thank you, Helen, and thanks, Laura. Great question. I don't see any more hands going up. I know we in the diary booked this to finish at 3:30, but it's been a pretty great effort from the panel, and it's a little after 3, so I was feeling we might be generous and let them have half an hour back. So I'd like to wrap things up there, if I may. Firstly, by thanking you all for joining on a Friday afternoon, but in particular to the DWP team. So thank you so much, Simon, Matthew, Nick, Helen, Mike, Simon, and Louise, for firstly all the work that's gone into this, which I think is self-evidently pretty considerable, but also for your openness for engaging with the supplier base, which I know everyone, as you'll see from the comments in the chat function, people are very impressed by it and really appreciate. Then I'd like to end actually by just bringing up the next step slide. So we'll share the slide deck with everyone later this afternoon, along with a feedback form inviting those initial responses. And I think not only in the slide deck, there are some clear asks for input, but some new ones came up during the Q&A as well. And if any experiences people have international best practice, please do share that as well. And to reiterate Helen's call as well, for any thoughts or insights people can share on sort of standing up new teams in the current sort of COVID environment we're in would also be welcome. And finally, on that that feedback point, I think as we've seen, it's a great ambition from Simon and all the team, an excellent approach to industry engagement. But I'd actually like to end where we started with Simon sort of articulating the overall mission of DWP. This isn't just a digital strategy, as he said, this is for the whole department. And I think once we reflect on that mission, on the importance of what it is that DWP does, I think it's incumbent on all of us, all the supplier community on the call, to provide whatever insights, whatever thoughts we can share. So I'd just like to end with a bit of a call to action. Please do put as much effort and as much insight into this process as you can. Please do share your thoughts. I think it's incumbent on us as industry to match the government ambition and match the effort they've put in. So we'll be sending out the form later today. Please do mull it over and give it your best over the next 2 weeks. And with that, I think it's just time to say thanks all again for joining. Thank you so much to the DWP team for coming along, and everyone have a wonderful weekend. Cheerio.
Thanks, Henry. Thanks to you again.
Thanks, Henry. Thanks everyone for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you all. Bye.